Hello and good evening. Welcome to the Daily Grind here on Latte Firm. It is Monday, the 30th of June. Into July we go, and the transfer window is just beginning to simmer for Arsenal Football Club. Today, we're going to talk about, well, not Hugo Ekitike, and I'll tell you why shortly. We're going to talk about Thomas Partey. His contract has not been renewed. He is now a free agent, and we are going to move on. And we'll talk about Eberechi Eze, because Fabrizio Romano has broken the news. Hand of Arsenal has confirmed it, and there is a lot to talk about. Bring him home. Unfinished business. I'm also delighted to be joined by my good friend Haroon Hickman. Welcome to the Fern, Haroon. How are you, my man?
Yeah, good evening, FK. Thank you for the invite. Thank you for the invite on a scorching hot day. And I feel privileged that I get to talk about Eze. So I miss the Norgards of this world, but this is a fun one.
This is a fun one, and it's great to hear from you. How are you coping with the heat, by the way? Because you're obviously a Londoner as well, and it's a scorching 32, 33, although some of our fans, viewers across the world will be laughing at that. That is merely just a normal day out for them. But how are you coping?
London heat hits different, and I'll die on that hill. Not too bad, to be honest. I've got this running in the background, which is helpful and hopefully not disturbing the audio. But it's one of those where we'll complain when it's not this hot, and then we'll complain when it happens. So just got to enjoy it, I guess.
I know. Tell me about it. There we are. Listen, loads of people tuning in. Thank you so much for all the kind greetings. As you can see, I'm just sort of reeling off a few that just catch my eye. Hand of Arsenal is in the house. Haroon is genuinely family, he says. Exciting things coming soon. Yeah, I mentioned that he was asking yesterday. He's always in the DMs like, who got on the show? Who got on the show? And I said Haroon. I was like, he's a friend of mine. He was like, top guest. There you go. Hand of Arsenal texting me about you, saying top guest. Thank you, everybody. Please do like the video, subscribe to the channel, all that sort of stuff. Welcome to the Daily Grind. The Daily Grind has been really popular. It's been a fantastic daily show. I'm really enjoying it, and the views and the comments and the likes and the subscribes, really welcome. So thank you so much for all of your generosity, people. Haroon, when we were talking last night, we were going to do a show on Hugo Ekitike because, dubbed the next Alexander Isak, Arsenal were loosely linked with him, and it seems like our pursuit of a striker is just dragging on. However, first exclusive of tonight's show, not that anyone really needed it, Hand of Arsenal sent me a little message saying we have no interest in Hugo Ekitike. So we're going to move on very swiftly from this and not really sort of mention him, but let me get your thoughts. I mean, if you know anything about the striker, and if we're talking about Šeško and Gyökeres, do you have a preference out of those three?
Yeah, I mean, I saw the links come up, wasn't hugely enthused because it wasn't one of the Mockbell Ornstein Hand of Arsenal sources. Lovely player. I think for the price, it's probably a bit punchy. Fees touted around 100 million euros, I think. And it's just one of those where he's underperformed his XG, gets into fantastic positions, but ball striking is questionable. Apparently, the manager has never been super convinced on him as an option. But if I were to pick, I'd go Šeško. I think there are things that we can talk about Eze that are similar to him in terms of X factor, and I think that the raw ingredients he has feels like the kind of raw ingredients the manager would want to work with. So he's my man at the moment.
I appreciate that. Looking forward to talking about the X Factor. People in the chat very excited about Eberechi Eze. So let's race through this and get to him. The next story that I want to sort of just cover very briefly: no new contract for Thomas Partey. Of course, he's been at Arsenal now for a number of years. Had a really good season, I guess, compared to the first 2 or 3 years that he had with the club. The club have decided not to renew his contract. Haroon, no real complaints from me. I've been talking about this from a footballistic perspective. He's at the wrong end of his sort of career, wrong end in terms of age profile. I don't think he's going to get any fitter, stronger, more dynamic, less injury prone as the years come and go. So this is welcome from my side. I think it's just time to refresh and renew that midfield.
Agree. I think sigh of relief from my side. I think a good decision. I think he missed 81 games in his Arsenal career, 32 now. Big wages, and I think it's really impressive that we've made shrewd movements to replace him quickly. So I think it's an anxiety that has been quickly filled from a footballing perspective, and we can move on.
Indeed. And listen, the wages that you just mentioned, he was on just over £250,000 a week. That is now going to be invested maybe elsewhere in the squad, and potentially even contributing towards contract renewals, which is really important. Here's a story. This is where we start getting a little bit excited. So just after midday today, Fabrizio Romano released a story saying that Arsenal have made contact with Eberechi Eze's camp over the weekend. Contacts are taking place for the Crystal Palace star. And there is also Tottenham interested in the sort of background. Hound of Arsenal, who we all know and love, then followed up about half an hour later saying, my understanding is that the meeting took place with the Eze camp on Saturday. Arteta was a part of these exploratory talks. I'm yet to be told personal terms are agreed or whether we've approached Crystal Palace, but until we do, I advise caution until a serious move is made for now. I mean, the story is that there is some sort of link there. There is some sort of activity. Just as a high level intro, before we start looking at some of his sort of profile and some of his playing stats and styles, how does this news grab you? Are you excited by it? Were you expecting it? How do you
Yeah, slightly unexpected, incredibly excited. I think he's one of my favorite non-Arsenal players. And we'll go into the sort of details of how he fits statistically and systemically into the team. But I think a good starting point is thinking emotionally about a player and how they make you feel when you watch them. And look, he's an Arsenal boy. He's got clear affection for the club. When I watch him, there's a real joy in his playing style. I love his type of creativity. It's very problem-solving focused. I imagine that against a low block, and I think that's just the kind of player we need. And I think can now watch him and develop trust in his shot and his final pass, and that's something that's developed a lot in the last season. So that instant feeling was one of cautious excitement, because I think, as you can see from the Hand of Arsenal update there, we're not anywhere particularly close with this, but the conversations are interesting, and I think it's also an interesting dynamic when you consider the other transfers we've got going on potentially in the forward line, whether that plays into being an addition to those or potential option on the left-hand side remains to be seen. But yeah, very excited.
It is. X Factor is a great way of describing him, and we're going to bring up some of his sort of stats shortly. Hand of Arsenal says, I kind of accidentally stitched up Mikel today, tapping up Eze somewhat. We know it happens in the game. And speaking of Hand of Arsenal, Paul Pavlinsky, thank you so much for your generous contribution to the channel. It is greatly appreciated, and your support says, hope we hear some good news on the striker soon. Appreciate your work, FK and Hand of Arsenal. Look at that. Praise for Hand of Arsenal, but I'm gonna take the credit for that and take the kind gesture. Thank you. I really appreciate that. Keep the Eze chat active, by the way. Hundreds of you have tuned in. Please do drop a like on the video, subscribe to the channel if you're new. Let's move on to what this kind of means. Look, player profile, first of all. I'm going to go through some of the stats. Apologies if you're watching this on a very small screen, but I've tried to gather in as much as I can. So what do we know about him? Haroon, we know that he's 27 years of age, so coming into his peak years. Not as tall as some of the other transfer targets that we've had this summer. You know, Mikel Arteta loves a 6 foot plus, but he's not quite there. Currently plays for Crystal Palace, is an England international with 12 caps to his name, has represented England at youth level as well. Predominantly right-footed. Interesting that he scored 8 goals this season, all 8 with his right foot, none with his left in the league, that is, and certainly none with his head. Can play attacking midfield, central midfield, loves to play out wide, left midfield, left wing. We'll come on to his positional map in just a second because that really surprised me. 31 appearances this season as starts, 3 off the bench, 8 goals against an XG of 10.5, so slightly underperforming there. He is in the 100th percentile of shots per game in the Premier League. So, if you're looking for someone to do that sort of devastation from midfield, if you're looking for someone to be creative and take shots, and we talk about that X factor, and that might be a nice segue to talk about that, he is shooting on sight, and that is very, very welcome because we are known to sort of pass our way into the box. 8 assists as well, relatively clean from a referee perspective, although that might change if and when he joins Arsenal. And his contract is due to expire at 27. We'll talk about the charts on the right in a second, but profile-wise, age-wise, experience with England, it seems like a really nice, natural fit to Arsenal and what Arteta is doing.
Yeah, it's super interesting. I think he's age-wise just turned 27 yesterday, actually. So interesting from that perspective, coming into his prime. Profile is an interesting one. I think if you look at the recruitment focus in the forward line, I think everyone can recite to you, we need a 9, we need a left winger. Obviously doesn't fit the 9 brief, doesn't really sit naturally in the left wing fit that we've sort of looked at so far. Having said that, I look at him as a perfectly sort of modular player across the attacking midfield. And in a way, going back to that X Factor point, which I kind of went on to originally, because I think back to when Bayern knocked us out in the 23-24 Champions League campaign, the brief from the club was, we need an X Factor in the attack. And to that extent, I think that this is a guy who can pop up in spaces, interlink with wingers, R9, very, very suitably, very effectively. Could fit in that twin 8 role, could play as a 10, could absolutely play from the left wing as well. So is a bit different from that. If you compare him directly to Rodrigo, it's a very different profile. I actually look at him in a way much like the Leo Trossard signing, albeit slightly more expensive. This guy isn't coming to us as a prolific goal scorer, but the raw ingredients are very interesting. His shot striking is high quality. His ball carrying strong. He's flexible across the front line, or rather just sort of behind the 9. So it's good to see that we're looking at solutions that include players that can fit into our existing automatisms, but can also detach from it and break systems too.
Yeah, listen, the positional versatility is something that really appeals to Mikel, and I think is actually quite a useful card to have in your pack when you're facing opposition. There is a level of uncertainty, a level of jeopardy in terms of like what's going to come from Mikel Arteta's team. Like we've been quite functional last season in particular. I think it was quite easy to sort of block us out and block that sort of creative threat, especially when some of our big hitters were out of the game. For me, this guy, you can see from his touch map there, courtesy of Optra Analyst, he likes to drift out on the left-hand side, loves to play in that sort of left 8. For me, lots of people talking in the chat about, what position could this guy play? He is an absolute shoo-in for that left 8 position. Like he's just, you've got Saka on the right, you've got Martinelli on the left. We'll talk about the impact on Gabby, and then you've got Odegaard and Eze that can play, and then you've got a Rice or a Zubimendi sort of holding him behind. That depending on what what your in-game state is and who you're playing. But like for me, he would just be that creative guy, unpredictable in terms of position, can drift out wide, can come in narrow, and the goals. In fact, let's just bring that up. And before I do, the sort of radar, again, courtesy of Opta, shows is in the 100th percentile for shots. So that is, he's top of the class for shots on goal. Touches in the box, 85th percentile. And then you've got, as I go around anti-clockwise, goals from midfield in the 90s, chances created in the 90s, dribbles attempted in the 90s. He's just a very attacking-minded, creative player that is going to get you goals. And for me, that is just a no-brainer. He obviously wants to play for Arsenal. Just before we look at his shot map, there is a really neat video going around. I've shared it on the Latte Firm socials. I don't know where Alex has clipped it from, but there's a lovely video saying, everything was Arsenal for him when he was a kid. He was in the academy. His dream was to play for Arsenal, and he's talking about playing at the Emirates. Presumably Palace were coming to the Emirates or something. I don't know what game it was, but I've obviously clipped it to make it suit our narrative. But he does have that Hale End link. He was released by the club at a young age. There is unfinished business here, Haroon, and for that alone, it's worth kind of contemplating, like bring him back home.
Yeah, look, I'm fully bought into the emotional story of this, as well as the fact that he's just a quality player. It would be very compelling in that sense. I think it's what drew me to say the Watkins possibility in January. There is something special about having your homegrown players play for you. I think the left 8 point is an interesting one that you brought up just now. I sort of agree and disagree. I think it's exactly where I'd see him as well. I think if we look at the profiles that Mikel has selected for that role, you've got Marino's played there. Rice is sort of the shoe-in at the moment. Originally signed Havertz to play that role. They've been a bit more physical, box crashy players, while Eze's obviously more the creative type. But I agree in the sense that there are absolutely games that serve us problems where actually we can go hyper creative in those 2-8 roles with Odegaard on the right, say Eze on the left. When we are faced with teams who will just come to play a low block. And I think it's important to have that flexibility in our squad. It's all well and good saying, let's say we have 2 similar profiles on the right 8, 2 similar profiles on the left 8, but being able to mix and match, I think is going to give us some sort of edge next season.
Yeah, I think so. There's a lot of comparisons to Jack Grealish in the chat, by the way. Kovacs, welcome to the show. I mean, look, having a squad full of different options gives Arteta the flexibility to play different players in different positions. Like when I say left 8, he could play left wing. I also think about life beyond Odegaard, and I don't mean that in the replacing Odegaard sense. I just mean when he's not at it, And there was times last season where he was injured and where there were lots of other things going on, when he just needs rest, when he's not in the squad. You need someone else to be the creator. And, this is the guy who I think could actually make us tick in that final third. And of course, like you say, get them in amongst the goals. Moving on to the goals, here's his shot map, again, courtesy of Opta Analyst. There's the XG of 10.48 or 10.5 that he just slightly underperformed. They're the goals that he scored, the pink dots that you can see. Some from within the box, a couple from outside the box, very welcome, all with his right foot, but he loves to shoot. He shoots at least 3 times a game. Shooting on sight is something that we're not so good at. And we don't have players. I mean, to be fair, Ødegaard was really good at it, then went through about months and months and months of not taking shots, and then sort of ended the season. And that PSG shot, do you remember that when Donnarumma got down to his left side away at the Paris Stadium? I mean, we need goals from midfield. It is as simple as that. And I mean, we need goals from up front, but we need goals from midfield, our wide players. Eze's certainly going to notch those numbers up.
For sure. If you look at the shots per 90 numbers, I think Saka's at 3.44 shots per 90, Eze's at 3.48. For more context, Leo's at, I think, 2.55.
Wow.
Ødegaard's down at 1.86. So this is someone who's not shot shy and is in tandem with that a exceptionally strong ball carrier. So yeah, I think that having that sort of profile in our attacking midfield would be incredibly valuable. It is something that we miss. It is something that we need to do more of. It's something I was envious of Liverpool for the last couple of seasons. I think we have a tendency to try, I wouldn't say create the perfect goal, but create the perfect opening. Sometimes that's not feasible. If you look at his goal against us at the Emirates, exceptional technique from the edge of the area. If you look at his goal in the FA Cup final, it was a fantastically timed run. He can do a bit of that sort of 2022-23 Ødegaard role from midfield. And if we have that combined with our captain rediscovering that type of shooting form, that's an exceptional uptick in threat.
It is. I'm getting really excited. There's so many in the chat, but I've got to ask another question, Haroon. I mean, obviously we can sit here and praise Eberechi Eze and think about the sort of romance involved with having a former academy sort of product come back to the club. Do you see any downsides into this move? And just before I get your answer, I mean, Jimmy H32 says, I'm sorry, I like Eze, but overall, I don't actually see any upgrade or anything more to what he can bring. He is not a player who likes to take on players, and he is not direct. Do you share that sentiment? Are there anything that you saw in your sort of research of him, or just generally when you watch him play, that you think maybe not?
Yeah, I would disagree about his directness and desire to take on players. I think he's pretty good at that. I think he's in the 86th percentile for successful take-ons. It's like 3.2 successful dribbles per 90. So that's pretty elite numbers there. Downsides are tricky. The age profile is fine, but not ideal. If we were talking about Eze at 24, 25 maybe, that'd be even more exciting. The price may have to be adjusted accordingly if that was the case. However, look, I think that there's not a sense that there's a player with raw pace here. He's a strong athlete, I think, but not the physical presence that we typically see in Mikel's left 8 signings. I know people have cited his off-the-ball work. Again, that kind of falls into the category of our manager can work with you on how our system how you need to fit into the system. So I'm not too concerned about that. I honestly don't see a huge number of downsides here. I think this is an incredibly versatile player. I've tried to look at the downsides. I even looked at the injury record, and barring his kind of freak Achilles rupture, which is I think 2021, it's been pretty clean. He missed 12 games, I think, in 23-24, missed 5 last season. Nothing sort of repetitive or particularly concerning there. So I think it would be a Premier League proven, shot heavy dribbler who loves the club. It's hard to look at negatives on this one.
It is. When you put it like that, it's like a no-brainer. I mean, he's got a release clause that we can pay in installments, which will suit Arsenal, of course, as well. So from a financial perspective, it seems doable. It might obviously have an impact on other purchases that we want to make this window, but let's wait and see. Let's just dream today. I don't want to call this a sort of downside or even reservation. My only, I guess, lack of knowledge, because I've not seen him play week in, week out. Like I see the highlights, everyone sees the goals, everyone sees the moments when people sort of praise players that are outside of your club on socials. Can he do it on a consistent basis? Can he maintain that sort of level of performance at a higher level at Arsenal and playing more games? This is not just 33 Premier League games. I know he did it in the FA Cup this year. Fantastic achievement by Crystal Palace. But is he capable enough to do it in the league, and then in the Champions League 3 days later, and then back in the league again? I think he is. I think he probably will be. And maybe I'm just, really sort of nitpicking, but that's probably my only thing, that he's not played at a top club in relentless level of competition week in, week out, a game every sort of 3-4 days. Can he handle that level? But there's only one way to find out. So let's sort of wait and see. I do want to talk about his position. Lots of people in the chat, I've just said left 8, people disagreeing with that. You said left wide, can play number 10. This is also courtesy of Optramalist. He played 94% of his Premier League games left wing for Crystal Palace last season, 2,600 minutes. And that obviously has a impact on Gabby Martinelli. Now, yesterday I was joined by Tom Canton of the Gooner Talk TV, where we talked about the links to Gabriel Martinelli to Saudi Arabia. But you were telling me earlier tonight that that's kind of been diminished now. You don't think it's going to happen. So what sort of impact could this have on Gabby Martinelli? Is it going to force him out, or could it maybe see the best of him?
Yeah, on Gabby, I think James Bench put out a tweet earlier saying Martinelli's not interested in the move to Saudi, and Arsenal themselves are not interested in moving him on, which I think is the right decision. I think my view is that this is a left winger who hasn't quite reached the potential that we expected, but still has a role to play, knows the system, could be a great second fiddle to someone else, or be a direct challenger to another player that comes in, and then that could potentially be Eze in that left wing role. I think I alluded to earlier, he's a very, very different type of profile. Martinelli's a big space runner. Eze would be much more suited to playing against low blocks and playing in tight spaces. Sorry. I don't see it being detrimental to Martinelli. I think competition is good. It probably, we'd hope, bring the best out of him. And again, I go back to that point of modularity and solutions to problems. Not every game is the same. Not every game has the same issues and problems. There are times where we played Martinelli into the ground last season, having a player of this quality on the left wing to line up against, say, the promoted teams that just come up, or the lower half of the table, who will come to the Emirates and sit deep. You just say Eze clearly starts this one. So I think there's some time sharing that could go on there that would be valuable for us tactically, but also for Martinelli as a player to keep him fresh. So I struggle to see that. I can also see them playing together. I can see, going back to your point about the 8s, Eze in a left 8, Martinelli on the left wing. They wouldn't occupy the same spaces necessarily. They wouldn't trip up over each other. And I think we should start looking at squad construction more in terms of how many problems can we solve with the players that we've got, not sort of just a first 11 basis. So yeah, my concerns are minimal on that one, I think.
And if you think about the way that we build our play when we're in attack on the ball, when we're in possession, you got that sort of 3-3-4 that Billy Carpenter always talks about. And Billy's, by the way, great follow. If you guys aren't reading his stuff, get on there. Yeah, the left back's going to tuck into midfield, MLS. He'll be alongside Rice and maybe Ødegaard, and then you've got that sort of front four of Saka, the wide man, Eze, and the striker. I mean, low blocks. Lots of people have been talking about in the chat. The creativity aspect and the positional versatility of Eze is really exciting, and I think he could hopefully bring out the best in Martinelli. And of course, Mikel Arteta loves a midfielder that can play up top. And there you have it. A small percentage of his time was played up top. Can I just ask one question before we wrap up the Eze chat and talk about your unpopular signing? Could it be Eze and Rodrigo, or if it was one of the two, who would you prefer?
Tough. I mean, I'd love it to be Eze and Rodrigo. I think in that world, I would move Trossard on, or attempt to move Trossard on this summer, and then look to move, let's say, Jesus on in the winter window. Financial outlay wise, that'd be pretty substantial. So my hunch is that, well, firstly, these are very, very early talks with Eze. So as much as I want to start getting his name and number printed on the incoming third kit. I'm holding fire. I think this is one of those situations where, because of how Andrea Berta operates, because he wants to explore options in various positions, it's more likely to be Rodrigo or Eze. And Eze is just a potential at left wing if we can't force a move for Rodrigo, which in itself is going to be pretty tricky, given that despite him being benched for I think a third game in a row now, he's not come out and said I'm leaving the club, so that has a while to rumble on. So yeah, my hunch is it's an either or, but look, I also thought Thomas Partey was going to sign on and stay, and that situation flipped in a week, so you never know.
You never know. Andrea Berta is absolutely keeping us guessing, but it is beginning to fire up. Rob El Mahdi says, meanwhile, Chelsea have a 50-man squad. Listen, do you know what? I've been talking to quite a few people in the private sort of chats, and I'm delighted to share that Kieran Maguire is going to be on the Latte firm very, very soon to talk about finance in football, because I need him, Haroon, to explain to me, like I'm a 5-year-old, how Chelsea are doing what they're doing, why Villa can get away with selling their women's team to their whatever it is, and it is absolutely driving me mad. But yeah, you guys in the chat, you and me both, we are just perplexed with that whole situation. There's your profile on Eze. I think the conclusion is a great player that we would love to have. There is a story that remains to be finished with the romance of him being part of the academy. Positionally very versatile, can score goals, will score goals, can be the creator as well, alongside Ødegaard in certain in-game scenarios, but also without Ødegaard, which is something where we really lack. From an availability perspective, ever present for Palace, a key player in their FA Cup run, but of course hasn't had too many injury issues during his career, apart from the serious one that you mentioned from a few years ago. And 68 million quid can be paid on installments. I wonder if Senori Berta is going to start cooking. Let's move on towards the tail end of the show. This is what we do with all of our guests. Actually, no, just before we do that, because you've not been on for a long time, talked with Tom yesterday about this is what our potential window could look like. How are you feeling about the window in general? I mean, look, Kepa, Mosquera, who I believe we're going in for again, Zubimendi, who will be announced very, very soon, and Christian Norgard. And of course, we've just talked about Eze, but those four, how do they grab you?
Yeah, look, I would categorize 3 of the 4 of them in the shrewd, smart, sensible signings category, which I think is fine at this stage. They're low-hanging fruit. We've gone to get Kepa, soon to be Mosquera, hopefully, and Norgard, and they've plugged gaps that we need. They're not sort of the nailed-on starter types that you'd think of, but that's fine. I think Zubimendi, I'll echo the thoughts of pretty much every esteemed guest that has come here to say there'd be much more fanfare if this had been broken today or yesterday, and we're being a bit numb to the fact that this is one of the best defensive midfielders in the world. So terrifically excited about that. I'm quite content so far. I think fans can often make the mistake of judging what comes out from the reports and in the public eye as how the club is acting and the work that it's doing. There's plenty going on behind the scenes. It's the 30th of June. Pre-season's on the 19th of July. There's still plenty of time to get what I see as the main targets, which is the left wing and the 9 now. I have full faith in our ability to do that effectively. There's not been any indication that we're struggling on that front. It was just we're working in a different way with a different sporting director. So I think as it stands, if this was the window, I'd be disappointed. But as in if we're looking back at it at the end of the window, but I'm confident we'll make those additions. If we get the striker and the left winger, I'd mark it an 8 out of 10. Add a right winger for Bukayo back up, make it a 9, and then getting rid of remaining deadwood would make it a 10. But I think another element I'd probably just add as a final point is the renewals, and those are going quite steadily as well. So we've locked down one of our 2 centre backs. We've locked down Miles. Waneri's hopefully not too far off. Talks with Saliba and Saka heading the right direction. And that's such a great platform and foundation to move on from and get that off our heads for a couple of years. So yeah, I'm in a calm place with it, which I don't know if that's the sentiment shared by everyone, but I refuse to get worked up at this stage of the season, at this stage of the window, I guess.
It's definitely not shared by everyone. Let me tell you, I've been doing these shows long enough to know that there are some unhappy people out there, and I think that's fine. You know, people are entitled to their opinions. I also think that, you know, the sort of order that we announce these deals in sometimes plays a part. I've talked about this before. You know, had we have opened the window with maybe one of our strikers and then a Zubimendi, and then let's say got to the end of the window and we nabbed Kepa and Norgard, you know, the last day of the window for, you know, 14 million quid for the two of them, people might have thought, well, yeah, these decent additions to the squad. That's just, you know, squad building. So I think we have to wait. And there's one comment that I starred earlier and I didn't sort of share, but Manny was saying, I don't want to pick on you, Manny, personally, but he says, you know, I don't think he's good value at 68 million pounds. Eze, that is. Price shouldn't matter, but it does. 55 million max. I think price is actually irrelevant. I think it's more about proportion of your spend. So, you know, if it's 68 million pounds of 300 million quid, who cares? If it's 68 million pounds of 90 million quid in total, then I'd be a little bit nervous. So I think the value is determined by what it allows you and doesn't allow you to do for the rest of the window. And of course, there's amortization, which we'll have to bear in mind. Let's move to, by the way, there are hundreds of you watching live right now on YouTube. Please do like the video. It's a massive help. You guys have been fantastic over the last couple of weeks since we started these daily grinds. And subscribe if you're new. And if you like what you hear, and if you're late to YouTube or whatever, you can get these as podcasts on Apple and Spotify, normally around 36 hours after they go out live. So do like that and subscribe. It's a massive help. Let's move on to your unpopular signing opinion. So before you reveal the player name, Haroon, I want you to talk about why this position and why that sort of player profile. And then as you name him, I will bring him up on screen. So what's the background thinking to this particular edition before people fall off their chairs?
So, yeah, a bit of context. I think, quite a lot of names have been covered, so I didn't want to just come out with a Garnacho again. Although I don't hate that one, so that's another. That's another one to
Ooh,
throw
there you
in.
go. I'm turning people. Yeah, go on.
But what I was thinking was, I worry from this window that we'll neglect the right wing and neglect giving Bukayo someone to rotate with and give him some rest. So he's, you know, coming to the latter stages of the season with some freshness in his legs. The player I have in mind is able to do that. He's genuinely two-footed. Registered 11 assists in the league last season, so I think that's the third most.
Nice.
And a fun stat: he ranks top of all the players in the league to play at least 300 minutes for the average distance of each of his carries. Couple that with
wait, that's a real head thinker. That, sorry, say that in slow motion.
So he ranks top of all the players in the league to play at least 300 minutes this season.
Yep.
For the average distance of each of his carries.
Oh, right. Okay.
So couple that with couple that with the fact that he has a completely squeaky clean injury record. So good age, raw pace. My man here is Anthony Elanga.
Do you know what? It's a shout. I can't knock it. Chat, let me know how you feel. Anthony Elanga of Nottingham Forest. Of course, now he used to be at Manchester United, has been linked with a move to Newcastle, who can't seem to buy anybody this window. I'm really intrigued to know if this is going to be an unpopular sort of signing, Arsenal fans. Let me know in the chat. But you think he could be a backup option, potentially squad depth for us as a wide player?
I think so. The reason I'd categorize him as unpopular is in a world where we signed Elanga having been linked with Rodrigo and Williams, and we get this guy, I think people would be upset. But objectively, it's someone who could genuinely play on both wings, has played most of his football from the right, high assist numbers. It just feels like a robust profile that no one would be particularly excited about. I'd prefer him to Semenyo, for example, who some people have enjoyed. But yeah, it's unfortunately unlikely because it seems like Newcastle are pretty interested in this one. And I don't think it's going to be the sort of price coup that it would have been, let's say, last summer. But I think the ingredients are there for a player who'd be an interesting part of the squad, a pretty valuable part of the squad.
Well, listen, the chat are very supportive of this. Nathan says Elanga would be brilliant.
Okay, so it's not unpopular at all.
It's not unpopular, although look, when the bar is this, better than Madueke, who did not go down very well at the weekend. Shane's just shouting, no! Dr. Adventure says, as a backup, that's not a bad shout, not going to lie. Would be, listen, it's not bad. He's Viggs, who's very critical sometimes. Fairs, good shout. But Forest have rejected a bid of £45 million. So we're going to have to see. Way too expensive, says Chrome. Chrome, it's good to see you. Not seen you in the chat for a long time, man, unless I've missed you. But that is great. And listen, this is not volunteered by Haroon or any of my guests. I put them on the spot. I tried to get the conversation flowing. That's been really fun. So what have we covered then? Hugo Ekatike, Hand of Arsenal, says we are not interested in him, so no point doing the show. And I don't want to be all clickbaity on the channel. Thomas Partey's contract has not been renewed. He will now be released from Arsenal Football Club, and we now will look ahead to the future without Thomas Partey. Eberechi Eze is talk of the town. Fabrizio Romano and Hand of Arsenal releasing their stories today. Talks have happened. Let's see how this progresses over the next few days. We've really enjoyed talking about his playing profile, his strengths, his stats, his numbers, his positioning. So I'm really grateful for that. Haroon can be found on socials at Haroon Hickman. And of course, if you want to throw some shade at him for his unpopular choice of Anthony Elanga, please feel free to do so. Haroon, thank you, man. Really appreciate your time tonight. I hope you've enjoyed that. Are you optimistic that we're going to get everything that we need to do before the start of the season?
Yeah, no, I mean, like, firstly, thank you so much. And thank you for doing these day after day. Yeah, appreciate you have a family, a heavy job as well. So yeah, shout out for doing this. It's exceptional
Thanks,
work.
man.
And yeah, look, I'm confident. I think that from what you hear around the club, lessons have been learned from the last two windows. And at this stage, that's kind of all you can ask for. And I think that there's a clear sense of profiles that we're going for. And I think given that we're still just about in June, you can only try and be positive at this stage. So I'm going to keep the optimism unless I have a reason not to be optimistic.
Do it, man. And another reason to be optimistic, we enter a new PSR year from tonight, midnight. So we shall see what Arsenal do. Ladies and gents, boys and girls, thank you so much for tuning in. We will be back tomorrow on the Daily Grind. I have Harry Symeou joining of the BBC and the Chronicles of Aguna. So do come and check us out. I'll share links and timings then. Keep feeding back, keep liking the videos, keep subscribing. Really, really appreciate all of you guys. And Paul Pavlinsky, thank you so much for your super chat earlier on. It is greatly appreciated. Look after yourselves, stay cool and sleep well. Bye for now.